In the opulent villa overlooking the azure Mediterranean Sea, the billionaire's family gathered for a leisurely afternoon by the sparkling pool. The sun cast a golden glow on the marble tiles, where elegant lounge chairs were arranged in perfect symmetry. The billionaire himself, Mr. Alexander Voss, sat with his wife Elena and her two closest friends, sipping chilled champagne from crystal flutes. Their young son, little Theo, just 7 years old, played nearby, his laughter echoing like music. Theo was the apple of his father's eye, heir to a fortune built on tech empires and real estate kingdoms. But today, the boy's curiosity led him too close to the water's edge. As he reached for a floating toy, his foot slipped on the wet surface, and with a startled cry, he tumbled into the deep end of the pool. The splash was sudden, sending ripples across the calm water. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while her friends froze in horror, their designer dresses suddenly feeling too constricting. Alexander leaned forward, his face paling, but none of them moved. They were paralyzed by shock, or perhaps by the fear of ruining their perfect appearances. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the villa, Maria, the family's long-suffering maid, watched from afar. She had been humiliated earlier that morning when Elena berated her publicly for a minor spill, calling her clumsy and worthless in front of guests. Maria's cheeks had burned with shame, but she swallowed her pride as always, knowing her job was her lifeline. Now, hearing the child splash and seeing the adults in action, something inside her snapped. Without a second thought, she dropped her cleaning tray and sprinted toward the pool, her simple uniform dress billowing behind her. The water churned as Theo flailed desperately, his small arms thrashing against the surface. Bubbles rose around him, and his cries turned to gurgles as water filled his mouth. He had never learned to swim properly. The family always hired instructors, but lessons were often postponed for more important engagements. Elena screamed, "Theo! Oh my God, Theo!" But she remained seated, her manicured nails digging into the armrest. Her friend Sophia covered her eyes, whispering prayers, while Isabella fanned herself dramatically, as if the heat were the real emergency. Alexander stood up slowly, shouting for help, but his voice lacked urgency, as if expecting a servant to materialize. The poolside was a scene of frozen elegance, the adults trapped in their world of privilege where problems were solved by others. Maria, however, didn't hesitate. She kicked off her shoes mid-stride and dove into the water fully clothed, her dress soaking instantly. The cold shocked her system, but adrenaline surged through her veins. She swam with powerful strokes, honed from years of hard labor in her village back home. Reaching Theo in seconds, she grabbed his arm just as he began to sink deeper. "Hold on, little one," she yelled, pulling him toward her. Theo coughed and sputtered, clinging to her like a lifeline. The water was deeper than she expected, but Maria's determination was unyielding. She kicked hard, propelling them both toward the shallow end. The billionaire's family watched in stunned silence, their expressions a mix of relief and disbelief. How could this lowly maid, the one they barely noticed except to command, be the hero in this crisis? Alexander's mind raced with thoughts of lawsuits and reputations, but for now, all he could do was stare as Maria saved his son's life. As Maria hauled Theo to the pool's edge, water streaming from their bodies, the boy's cries pierced the air. He gasped for breath, his face pale and terrified. Maria lifted him out with surprising strength, laying him gently on the tiles. She knelt beside him, patting his back to expel any remaining water, her own breath coming in ragged gasps. "It's okay, Theo, you're safe now," she soothed in her accented English, her voice calm despite the chaos. The child nodded weakly, tears mixing with pool water on his cheeks. Elena finally rushed over, her heels clicking frantically, pushing Maria aside to embrace her son. "My baby. Oh, thank God," she wailed, as if she had been the one to rescue him. Sophia and Isabella hovered nearby, offering useless platitudes like, "What a scare," and, "Poor darling." Alexander approached more composedly, his phone already in hand to call for a private doctor. He glanced at Maria, who was now standing dripping wet, her uniform clinging uncomfortably. For a moment, gratitude flickered in his eyes, but it was quickly overshadowed by his authoritative demeanor. "Good work," he muttered, as if praising an employee for completing a task. Maria said nothing, her heart pounding from exertion and emotion. She remembered the morning's humiliation, how Elena had screamed at her over a dropped glass, reducing her to tears in the kitchen. Yet here she was, the only one who acted when it mattered most. The staff whispered among themselves later, marveling at her bravery. But Maria knew this act wouldn't change her status, she was still the invisible help. As the family fussed over Theo, wrapping him in towels, Maria slipped away quietly to change, her mind swirling with a mix of pride and resentment. The incident spread like wildfire through the villa's gossip channels. By evening, the staff buzzed about Maria's heroism while the family downplayed it at dinner. Theo, recovered and tucked into bed, asked for Maria to read him a story, but Elena dismissed the idea, saying the maid had duties elsewhere. Alexander pondered the event in his study, realizing how close he came to losing his heir. He decided to reward Maria quietly, perhaps with a bonus, to avoid drawing attention. But deep down, he felt a twinge of shame for his inaction. Elena, meanwhile, rationalized her freeze as maternal shock, confiding in her friends over wine that she simply couldn't bear to jump in her new dress. They nodded sympathetically, sharing stories of their own near misses with domestic drama. Maria, exhausted in her small room, reflected on her life. She had come from a poor family in Brazil, sending money home every month. The Vosses paid well, but the constant belittling wore her down. Today's event reminded her of her own childhood, swimming in rivers to fetch water. She wondered if saving Theo would earn her respect or just more expectations. The next morning, Elena summoned Maria to the living room, her tone unusually soft. "About yesterday, thank you," she said stiffly, handing over an envelope with cash. Maria accepted it with a nod, but her eyes held no illusion. She knew the humiliation would resume soon enough. Yet, in that moment, she felt empowered, a quiet strength blooming within her. Weeks passed, and the pool incident became family lore, retold with embellishments at parties. Theo idolized Maria, sneaking to the kitchen for treats and stories. He drew pictures of her as a superhero, which she treasured secretly. Alexander noticed the bond and, surprisingly, encouraged it, perhaps seeing Maria as a stabilizing force. Elena, however, grew jealous, her comments sharpening. "Don't get too familiar," she'd snap when catching them together. Maria bore it silently, her resolve hardening. One day, during a grand gala at the villa, Theo wandered off again, this time toward the cliffs. History nearly repeated, but Maria's vigilance saved him once more, pulling him back from the edge. This time, the guests witnessed it, applauding her as a heroine. Alexander publicly thanked her, offering a promotion to household manager. Elena fumed privately but couldn't object amid the praise. Maria accepted, her status elevated overnight. She used her new position to advocate for better treatment of staff, implementing changes that fostered respect. Theo thrived under her influence, learning humility from her tales of hardship. The family dynamic shifted subtly, with Alexander reflecting on his privileges. Elena eventually softened, admitting her flaws in a rare vulnerable moment. Maria's act of bravery rippled outward, inspiring others in similar positions to stand tall. In the end, the humiliated maid became the unsung pillar of the household, proving that true worth lies in actions, not status. As Maria settled into her new role, memories of that fateful day lingered. She often sat by the pool at dusk, watching the water's serene surface, a reminder of chaos averted. Theo joined her sometimes, asking questions about courage. "Why did you jump when no one else did?" he'd inquire. Maria smiled, explaining that love and instinct don't wait for permission. Her life improved materially, better quarters, fair wages, but the real change was internal. She no longer felt invisible, her voice carried weight in decisions. Alexander consulted her on family matters, valuing her grounded perspective. Elena's barbs lessened, replaced by grudging respect. The friends who witnessed the drowning spread the story, turning Maria into a local legend among service workers. She received letters from others sharing similar experiences, forming a quiet network of support. One evening, Alexander confessed his regret for not acting sooner, admitting his world had blinded him to real heroism. Maria forgave him, knowing growth comes from mistakes. Theo grew up emulating her kindness, channeling his inheritance into charitable causes. The villa, once a symbol of excess, became a hub for community events. Maria's journey from humiliation to honor inspired a book deal, her memoir touching hearts worldwide. In quiet moments, she thanked that splash for awakening her potential. Years later, on Theo's 18th birthday, the family revisited the pool for a celebration. Laughter filled the air as guests mingled, but Maria was now an equal, seated at the head table. Theo toasted her in his speech, crediting her save for shaping his life. "You didn't just pull me from water, you pulled me from entitlement," he said, tears in his eyes. The crowd cheered, Elena clapping with genuine warmth. Alexander announced a foundation in Maria's name, aiding underprivileged workers. Maria, overwhelmed, reflected on her path. From a humiliated maid to a beloved figure, her bravery had rewritten destinies. She mentored young staff, teaching resilience and empathy. Theo pursued philanthropy, building schools in her homeland. The bond between them endured, a testament to one selfless act. As fireworks lit the sky, Maria felt content, her heart full. The drowning that could have ended tragically instead sparked transformation. In the end, it wasn't wealth that saved the day, but humanity. The story of Maria's heroism echoed beyond the villa, inspiring films and articles. Journalists sought her out, but she remained humble, focusing on her work. Theo, now a young man, often visited her, discussing life's challenges. He confided in her about pressures of inheritance, finding solace in her wisdom. Elena and Maria developed an unlikely friendship, bonding over shared stories. Alexander retired, dedicating time to family, grateful for the wake-up call. The pool, once a site of near tragedy, became a place of reflection. Maria swam there daily, her strokes a meditation on strength. She sponsored education for her relatives, breaking cycles of poverty. Community leaders honored her with awards, but she valued the quiet thanks from those she helped most. Theo's foundation grew, impacting thousands. In retrospectives, Maria emphasized that anyone can be a hero, it's about choosing to act. Her life exemplified that true power lies in compassion, not position. As time marched on, Maria's influence permeated the Voss legacy. Theo married, starting a family grounded in values she instilled. Grandchildren called her Abuela Maria, listening raptly to her tales. Elena passed away peacefully, her last words thanking Maria for saving more than Theo. Alexander followed, leaving a will that secured Maria's future. She retired to a modest home by the sea, writing and volunteering. Visitors came seeking advice, drawn to her aura of quiet fortitude. Theo's enterprises flourished ethically, a far cry from his father's cutthroat ways. The original pool incident faded into myth, but its lessons endured. Maria's memoir became a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages. In interviews, she stressed forgiveness and action over resentment. Her story reminded the world that heroes emerge from unexpected places, often the most overlooked. In her twilight years, Maria looked back with no regrets. The humiliated maid had become a beacon of hope, her single leap changing countless lives. Theo's descendants carried her spirit forward, ensuring her legacy lived on. The villa stood as a museum to humility, attracting tourists who marveled at the pool's story. Maria passed surrounded by loved ones, her final thoughts on that splash and the boy she saved. Her epitaph read, "She dove into uncertainty to pull out possibility." The world was better for her courage, proving that one act of bravery can ripple eternally.